So when it comes to the past year in movies, we've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. God damn you, Home Sweet Home Alone. You know what? Get off the screen. Anyways, we've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So now all that's left to discuss is the best of the best. So without further ado, let's get into my top 5 movies of 2021. And starting off my list at number 5 is gonna be A Quiet Place Part 2. And let's be honest, it is me we're talking about, so I had to at least get one horror title in there. But very rarely does a horror sequel, or any sequel for that matter, live up to the original. Especially considering, to me, A Quiet Place felt like a very well executed one-off movie that didn't need any sequels. I definitely wasn't in love with the idea of a part 2 when I heard the announcement, but against all odds, this movie may be even better than the first one. I was a big fan of starting this movie off with a flashback sequence, really explaining how these creatures crash landed on Earth, and all the madness that just kind of ensued from there. And if you're gonna kill off John Krasinski's character, you better replace him with another damn good actor. And I don't think they could have made a much better choice than Cillian Murphy. I've always been a fan of his acting, despite the fact that I have yet to see Peaky Blinders.
Move this man!
And to nobody's surprise, he is absolutely fantastic in this. My favorite part of the film actually revolves around this troubled relationship between him and Reagan, and how at the beginning of this movie, she really wants nothing to do with him because she maybe feels like he's trying to replace her father, and the eventual bond that they build throughout the runtime. Emily Blunt again is fantastic in this film, just as she was in the first one, and this really feels like they continued the story in a believable way, and not just a way where they were maybe looking for a cash grab sequel. John Krasinski has cemented himself as a force to be reckoned with, as a producer, director, and a screenwriter. And I don't know what his plans are in the future, but what I do know is he has certainly earned my trust. Anything he comes out with from here on out, I'm there day one. So number 5, A Quiet Place Part 2. Next up is another movie that I was completely unaware of up until a few months before its release. So coming in at number 4 is gonna be the Denis Villeneuve sci-fi epic, Dune. And this could have been even higher on my list, but this is just part 1 of a duology of movies. And this film makes it pretty clear that this isn't a complete story. They weren't even sure if there was gonna be a part 2 before this movie came out, but since it did so well in the theaters and on streaming services, part 2 has already been announced, and after seeing this, I cannot wait to see the conclusion. And love it or hate it, there's one thing that nobody can deny about this movie. So let's get the obvious out of the way. Dune is absolutely gorgeous. This may be the best looking movie I've ever seen.
Hey everyone! Come and see how good I look!
On top of that, this is probably the most loaded cast of 2021, with Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, Zendaya, and so many more. And with a loaded cast comes great responsibility, or whatever Uncle Ben said. And in this case, I think those expectations were met. When it comes to the heightened expectations of a loaded cast, this movie is like the polar opposite of movie 43, which was a fucking train wreck. And while I'm thinking of it, please tell me in the comments if you're one of the very few people that enjoyed movie 43. I want to hear from you. But back to Dune, Timothée Chalamet is excellent as our protagonist, Paul Atreides, and this kid is quickly becoming an actor to look out for. This was probably my favorite performance of his, up there with Beautiful Boy. Now this movie won't be for everybody. Dune was obviously made for a very specific audience. It has a very Star Wars A New Hope vibe to it, which George Lucas has given Frank Herbert credit for some of his inspiration, so that's no coincidence. So if you're not a fan of sci-fi, this probably won't be for you, but if you are, particularly the original Star Wars trilogy, you're doing yourself a huge disservice by not watching Dune. Next up at number 3 on my list, a movie that came out of nowhere, is Red Rocket. Yes, the movie about a former porn star. And the reason this movie works so well for me is our protagonist here, Mikey Saber, played by Simon Rex. And when you think of the phrase character study, this is exactly the person you think of. He honestly may be the single most fascinating character to come out of any movie from 2021. Like, on the surface, he's very charming and charismatic, so as the movie opens, you really like him. But then as the runtime continues, you start to see him for what he really is, which is just manipulative, deceptive, and just somebody who uses everybody around him for his own personal gain.
I just need a place to crash for a couple of days. What's the big deal?
Mikey, go fuck yourself.
And I don't care who you are, everybody has at least one person like this in their lives, so it is extremely relatable. The story here isn't overly complicated, it's just day-to-day life in a very small town, and this guy trying to get himself back to California by any means possible. And the movie and the main character are just so well written that even as he continues to show his true colors, a part of you can't help but root for this guy, which maybe says more about us as an audience than it does the character himself. But great writers just have this ability to make you continue to root for the bad guy as long as you're seeing the story from their point of view. And that's exactly what's going on here.
You're goddamn right.
But aside from Mikey, all the supporting characters are great as well, and they definitely deserve some credit for making Red Rocket work, with the other standout performance coming from Susanna Sun as Strawberry. Her version of Bye 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 from NSYNC is one of the highlights of the film. Like, it gives me goosebumps now just thinking about it. Even if you have no interest in seeing this movie, do yourselves a favor, go to YouTube and search Susanna Sun Bye Bye Bye. After finishing this video, of course. Alright, now my penultimate pick for the best movie of 2021 is gonna be Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, I've always been a huge fan of the Ghostbusters series, and I'm not gonna lie, after seeing that 2016 reboot, a part of my childhood died, and I was pretty convinced that the best days of this franchise were behind me. So when I went to go see Afterlife, my only expectations were, well, this has to be better than 2016, right? And obviously, since this is number 2 on my list, this movie blew my expectations clear out of the water. I went into this fully expecting Paul Rudd to be the one highlight in an otherwise average or maybe below average movie, but to my surprise, McKenna Grace as Phoebe absolutely stole the show here. She was hands down the best part of the movie, and outshining Paul Rudd is no easy feat. Trust me, I auditioned for I Love You, man. Should I show my audition tape? Slap in the bass. And anything they do going forward in this franchise better be centered around Phoebe's character, or they're screwing up. Afterlife had a lot of the same heart as the original Ghostbusters movie, and after I got home, I did some research, and well, I found the reason for that. Jason Reitman directed Afterlife, and for anybody who doesn't recognize that last name, his father, Ivan Reitman, actually directed the first 2 Ghostbusters films. So Jason had some immense pressure, and in my not so humble opinion, he absolutely did his father proud with this entry. For the first time in a long time, I'm excited again for the future of Ghostbusters.
It has a gunner seat?
But coming in at my number 1 spot for the best movie of 2021 is gonna be, well, yes, that's right, Spider-Man No Way Home. And could it be anything else? Trust me, I wanted so desperately to put some kind of more Sundance type film or independent film such as a Red Rocket at my number 1, but that would be me being disingenuous to how I truly felt. And I already did like a full 25-minute recap and review of this movie, which you can see right up here. So I won't go into too much detail here, but to keep it brief, me not being the biggest fan of everything MCU does, this movie pretty much delivered everything I wanted to see. Willem Dafoe was absolutely terrifying as the Green Goblin. As much as I enjoyed his campy, over-the-top version of the 2002 Spider-Man, I may have preferred this one even a little bit more. And coming from a Sam Raimi fanboy such as myself, that's a big deal.
You're lying, I swear.
It was no surprise that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were gonna make an appearance in this movie because, well, the internet is the worst, and they spoiled that surprise for everybody months in advance. But that being said, they both had a much larger role than I ever imagined them having. Like, our three Spider-Men got to share the screen for a majority of the second half of this movie, and their chemistry was amazing. No Way Home has a nice combination of these comedic sequences, but also some very hard-hitting emotional moments. Like, I legitimately teared up multiple times watching this movie.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay?
And the thing I'm the most happy about is my biggest issues with Tom Holland's Spider-Man were all taken care of in this movie. He finally stopped relying on Tony Stark and the Avengers, and he became his own man.
Shit.
Aunt May and MJ both got more fleshed out in this movie, in my opinion, than the first two movies combined. And for the first time in the trilogy, I actually cared about their characters. And as I mentioned before, being such a huge Sam Raimi fanboy, the way that No Way Home left off, I'm very excited for the future of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. This looks like it's setting up to be just Spider-Man on his own in New York City. And for bonus points, it was just an unreal experience in the movie theater and a prime example of why everything doesn't need to come immediately to streaming services. Some things are just meant to be experienced with a large group of people, and being in that crowd on opening night was an experience that I haven't felt personally since pre-COVID times. And God, do I miss that. But that's gonna do it for my top 5 movies of the past year. Now that those are out of the way, we can finally start focusing all the energy on everything 2022. So let me know what your top 5 movies look like in the comments down below. As always, you know I love reading those. Tell me where you agree and disagree with my movies. And while I have you, me and a couple buddies have recently started a pop culture podcast called Culture Shocked. Link for that is also in the description. So if you're a podcast person, please give it a listen. Let me know what you think. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing right over here so you don't miss any future content. And to see other movie reviews, rankings, video game rankings, all that kind of stuff on my channel, you can see some of those right over here. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.